Wild rice was designed to hide from you. The second it got ripe, the seeds would snap off the stalk and vanish into the mud. You couldn't catch it. You couldn't harvest it. But 9,000 years ago, people on the Yangtze River found a way to hijack this plant. They turned a simple grass into a glue that stops earthquakes, a fertilizer that makes itself out of thin air, and a set of rules that built a whole civilization. This is the greatest nature hack in history, and it all started because of one broken seed. The Yangtze River, 10,000 years ago. There were no kings back then, no metal tools, just water, mud, and wild grass taller than a person. Today, we think of rice as just a side dish, something that comes in a plastic container with your takeout. But for the people living in these swamps, rice was their everything. It wasn't just lunch, it was the magic ingredient for their whole world. It was the glue for their buildings. It was the medicine for their soil. It even changed the way they treated their neighbors. We have proof from a place called Shangshan that people were doing this 9,400 years ago. That's older than the first big cities in the Middle East. This isn't just a boring story about farming. It's a story about how a defective wild grass became the fuel for the biggest population boom the world has ever seen. And it starts with a woman standing in the mud looking for a very lucky mistake. 7,400 BC. You're gathering food in the Yangtze floodplain. You wade through knee-deep water. Thousands of rice stalks surround you. But the moment you reach for one, the seeds are gone. They've snapped off and buried themselves in the mud. This is the shatter trait. Wild rice has a built-in escape plan. When the seed ripens, a tiny layer of cells dissolves. The seed drops. It plants itself. The plant survives by not being eaten. In the wild, this is genius. For a human trying to gather food, it's a nightmare. But in every generation, a few plants are broken. A mutation stops the seed from snapping off. These mutant stalks hold on to their grain. In the wild, these plants are failures. They can't self-plant. They can't spread. They should go extinct. Except someone noticed them. A woman wades through the water. She ignores the thousands of stalks that drop their seeds. She finds the one stubborn plant still holding its grain. She doesn't know genetics. She doesn't know she's looking at a mutation scientists wouldn't identify until 2006. She just knows this one stalk means she can carry food home. She saves those seeds. She plants them. Her daughter does the same. Her granddaughter does the same. Within a few hundred generations, wild rice becomes farm rice. The shatter rate drops from almost 100% to less than 5%. The plant that refused to be harvested now can't survive without humans. Here's what we get wrong. We say humans discovered rice. That's not accurate. We rescued a genetic defect. We took the rejects, the plants failing at being wild, and gave them a new purpose. Rice didn't choose us. We chose the mistakes. That's the first hack. But now they had a new problem. Seeds that stay on the stalk are useless if weeds choke your field. They needed a weapon. They found one in the water itself. Most people assume rice grows in water because it's a thirsty plant that loves to swim. But that's actually a myth. Rice doesn't need to be underwater to grow. The truth is much cooler. Rice has a built-in snorkel system. If you look inside the stems and roots, there are tiny hollow tubes that let the plant breathe air from above, even when the bottom is totally submerged. While almost any other plant would drown in just a few inches of water, rice just stands there, breathing perfectly fine. So, if it doesn't need the water, why did the ancient Chinese flood their fields? Because they realized water could be used as a weapon. When you flood a field with 10 centimeters of water, you're basically starting a war. Every other weed and grass, things like millet or sedge, suffocates. They can't breathe underwater, so they die. But the rice with its snorkel stems survives. This means a rice paddy isn't just a swamp. It's a giant water-powered weed-killing machine. As far back as 6,500 BC, people on the Yangtze were building dirt walls to control the river. These weren't just messy piles of mud, they were clever gates. A farmer could just open a slot, let the river rush in, and drown every weed in the field in minutes. When the job was done, they'd close the gate and let the water drain back out. While farmers in other parts of the world were spending all day on their knees, pulling weeds one by one until their backs ached, the Yangtze farmers just walked to a wooden gate and lifted it. They let the river do all the hard work for them. One person, one gate, no weeding. It's the world's first automatic pest control, a high-tech water machine hidden inside a muddy field. But this trick had a catch. If you keep flooding the same field year after year, the dirt gets tired. The water washes away all the good nutrients that help plants grow. They needed a way to feed the soil without ever leaving the water. And they found the answer floating right on the surface. 4000 BC. Imagine you're a traveller walking past a rice field thousands of years ago. You look down and see the water covered in a thick, fuzzy red blanket. It looks gross, like the crop is rotting or diseased. You'd probably keep walking, but you'd be missing the most brilliant part of the whole system. That red stuff isn't a disease, it's a tiny floating plant called a fern. It might look like pond scum, but it's actually a natural nitrogen factory. Inside every single leaf of this fern lives a tiny bacteria. This bacteria has a superpower that most plants don't. They didn't need a factory. They just needed to watch how nature worked. The traveller who thought the field was dying, he was wrong. Underneath that red carpet, the rice was greener and taller than anything else for miles. We think we invented fertilizer in the modern world, but the ancient Chinese were already growing their own, right on top of the water, for free. Rice was now feeding the people, and it was even feeding itself. But they were about to discover that rice could do something even more impossible. It could hold up a mountain. For thousands of years, the farmer's biggest enemy was the clock. Traditional rice took about 150 days to grow, nearly 5 months of waiting and hoping. This meant you had exactly one chance per year to get it right. If a flood or a drought hit during those 5 months, the whole village could face a winter of hunger. But everything changed in the year 1012. The emperor heard about a special kind of rice from a region called Champa in what is now Vietnam. This rice was a total speed demon. It could grow from a seed to a full harvest in just 60 days. That's less than half the time of the old varieties. Plus, it didn't need nearly as much water to survive. The results of this nature hack were instant. Imagine you're a farmer in the Song dynasty. In the past, after you harvested your rice in the early summer, your field would sit empty until the next spring. There wasn't enough time left in the year to grow anything else. But with this new Champa rice, the moment you finished your first harvest, you could flood the field again and plant a second crop. Sometimes you could even get a third. Because there was so much extra grain, the population didn't just grow, it exploded. In just 80 years, the number of people in China shot from 50 million to over 100 million. This extra food fueled a golden age of inventions, like gunpowder, the printing press, and the world's first paper money. When you have enough food to feed everyone, people finally have the time to become scientists, merchants, and artists. But as the cities swelled, the people ran out of flat land. To keep this boom going, they had to take their farms where no one had dared to go before, straight up into the clouds. By the 1300s, all the easy flat land was full. The Hani people in Yunnan province were left with 45-degree vertical cliffs. These slopes were so steep that a single heavy rain could wash away a year's worth of soil in minutes. To survive here, they had to reshape the mountains by hand. They carved the jagged cliffs into thousands of level steps, turning the mountainside into a giant staircase made of water. Today, these terraces cover over 12,000 square kilometres, and some have been working for over 1,000 years. The real secret is the sponge at the very top. Above the terraces, there is a thick, ancient forest that catches the clouds and the mist, soaking up the moisture like a giant green cloth. Then they let gravity do the work. The water seeps out of the forest and into the top terrace. Once that one is full, it spills over into the next step, then the next. The farmers carve the ledges so perfectly that the water walks down the mountain. It moves just slow enough to feed the rice, but never fast enough to destroy the walls. It's a self-running system with no pumps or pipes, just stone, mud, and gravity. As they mastered the mountains, they realized this grain could do more than just fill stomachs. It could actually be used to build the strongest walls on Earth. Year 1500 AD. During the Ming Dynasty, while workers were rebuilding the Great Wall, they were also boiling massive vats of sticky rice porridge. It sounds like they were preparing a feast for the army, but they were actually making a secret ingredient for their construction. When you cook sticky rice, it releases a starch called amylopectin. The workers took this thick, gooey rice soup and mixed it with lime to create a superglue for the stones. At a tiny, microscopic level, the rice starch wove into the lime like a net, creating a bond that was incredibly tough. As this hot mixture cooled between the blocks, it fused the wall together into one solid bone. Today, when researchers try to pull these stones apart, they often find the rice glue is actually harder than the rock itself. But the most impressive part is how it handles earthquakes. Most old walls are brittle. When the ground shakes, they snap. But because of the rice starch, this mortar is slightly flexible. It can actually bend and absorb the shock of a massive earthquake. This breakfast glue is why many of these towers are still standing while modern buildings around them have collapsed. Rice wasn't just the food that fed the empire, it became the very skeleton that protected it. After 9,000 years of this, rice did something even more powerful than building walls or feeding millions. It changed the way people think. You see, rice farming, especially in these flooded paddies, cannot be done alone. If you open your water gate at the wrong time, your neighbour's field dries out. If you don't help your neighbour fix a leak in their wall, your own field might flood. Everyone's survival depends on everyone else. This forced everyone to work as a team for thousands of years. It shaped a culture built on harmony and shared responsibility. Scientists have even found that regions that grew rice are still better at teamwork today than regions that grew wheat. In a wheat field, you can work by yourself. You don't need your neighbour's permission to plant your seeds. But in a rice village, you have to talk. You have to agree on a schedule. You have to think in terms of we instead of I. The ideas of duty and social order didn't come from a book. They came from a landscape where you had to share the water or everyone would starve. And that brings us to the end of a 9,000-year journey. We started with a broken seed that couldn't survive on its own, and we ended with a grain that held up walls, carved mountains, and programmed a whole culture of cooperation. Rice is much more than a side dish. It is the most underestimated nature hack in history. A 9,000-year chain of quiet, brilliant ideas hidden in plain sight. If this changed how you see a simple grain of rice, subscribe. There are many more invisible systems waiting to be uncovered along the Silk Road. Enjoy watching.